Imagine this. A sitting head of state is captured, flown to the United States, and put on trial. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a political thriller, right? But this actually happened to Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in a Manhattan courtroom. We're going to break down exactly how this unprecedented event unfolded.
So, when the U.S. judge asked him for his name, this was his answer. Not Nicolas Maduro, he stated his title. And that one sentence, wow, it just perfectly frames the entire conflict here. Is he a criminal defendant, or is he a sovereign leader who's been illegally detained? That's the question at the very heart of this entire case.
You have to understand, this wasn't just some trial. It was a massive international incident playing out in real time. The legal battle happening in that courtroom had absolutely staggering global implications, and you can bet the whole world was watching.
The speed of this is just incredible. I mean, think about it. Just 48 hours before he's standing in that courtroom, Maduro was in the presidential palace in Caracas. Now, court documents are describing him as a shackled criminal defendant. The contrast is just jarring. So you've got to be asking, how does this even happen? How does a president go from his palace to a U.S. jail cell in just 2 days? Well, it all came down to a really high-stakes military and legal operation.
The journey itself was this massive, complex operation. After he was captured in Caracas, he was flown directly to a federal detention center over in Brooklyn. But then, to get him to his court date, the security was just off the charts. A helicopter flight across the East River, to avoid traffic, and then an armored convoy for the last few blocks to the courthouse in Manhattan.
Inside the courthouse, the scene was incredibly tense. We're talking a heavy guard presence, K-9 units patrolling the halls, and get this, U.S. Marshals were meticulously inspecting the actual chair Maduro was going to sit in. Every single detail was a reminder of just how high the stakes were.
Okay, so this brings us to the real core of the issue. What was the U.S. case against him? The government brought some extremely serious charges, and not just against Maduro, but also against his wife, Celia Flores, who was captured and put on trial right alongside him.
So here they are, the formal charges: narcoterrorism conspiracy, cocaine trafficking, and a bunch of related weapons offenses. The U.S. was sending a very clear message with this. In their eyes, these weren't political acts, they were criminal ones.
Now, you might hear that term narcoterrorism and wonder what it really means. It's actually central to the whole case. It basically means using violence and terror tactics, but not for some political cause. Instead, it's to help a drug trafficking organization achieve its goals.
The prosecutors argued that Maduro and his wife used their official power, what they called the veil of the Venezuelan government, as a cover to run a huge drug conspiracy. And the allegations were pretty damning, including claims that they handed out passports to traffickers and were even involved in kidnapping and murder.
So in response to all of these charges, Maduro was absolutely defiant. He declared his innocence, saying he was a decent man, and reminding the court, "I am still president of my country." His wife, Celia Flores, she pleaded not guilty, completely innocent.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Maduro's defense wasn't just about denying the charges. No, his legal team challenged the entire process, basically arguing that a U.S. court has zero jurisdiction over a foreign head of state.
And this right here, this slide really shows you the two clashing realities at the center of this whole thing. For the U.S. prosecution, he was a criminal defendant, plain and simple. But for his defense team, he was a sovereign leader, the victim of a military abduction who should be treated as a prisoner of war.
And then there was another layer to all the drama in the courtroom: the appearance of his wife, Celia Flores. She was seen with a bruised and bandaged head. Her lawyer actually told the court she got those injuries during the raid that captured them, and that she might have a fracture or severely bruised ribs.
And that defiant prisoner of war stance, he held on to it right until the very end. As he was being led out of the courtroom, some heckler shouted at him. Maduro actually stopped, turned around and declared, "I am the elected president. I am a prisoner of war. I will be free."
So with two completely opposing realities crashing into each other, you have to wonder, what happens next? Well, the legal and political fallout from this unbelievable case was really just getting started.
And you have to remember, these events weren't just happening in a New York courtroom bubble. While all this was going on, Maduro's son, who, by the way, is also indicted in the U.S., was back in Venezuela addressing their National Assembly. And his message was broadcast for everyone to hear: "Dad, the nation is in good hands while we await your return."
But let's be real, their return wasn't going to happen anytime soon. The immediate legal situation was pretty clear. His lawyers didn't even bother asking for bail. He was sent right back to jail in Brooklyn to wait for what his lawyers called a complicated case, and his next court date wasn't for months. He wasn't going anywhere.
Ultimately, this whole case leaves us with this huge, fundamental question, one that goes way beyond this one courtroom. It's a clash of principles, a clash of nations. So the real takeaway here is this dilemma. When a world leader is accused of crimes this serious, where does their country's sovereignty end and the demand for international justice begin?